Jackson Podcast.
Been meaning to do this show for a while because I feel as if Robert F. Williams' story needs to be told. You know, they say he was too real for the civil rights. He didn't stand with the NAACP. He was a military man, and he wasn't for integration. He wanted black folks to stand on their own, and he's from close by to where I'm located, Monroe, North Carolina. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and this story was really hitting home to me. It was pivotal to me that I discuss this and bring this to the channel because I feel as if brothers need to hear this. He was the man who terrified the KKK. And salute to this brother, Black Stories Untold, for creating this piece that we're going to discuss. Also, it was a book created about Robert F. Williams, and it was called Negroes with Guns. I want to get that book also because it's like that. When I think about the civil rights or I think about integration, I think about marching, I think about Martin Luther King with peaceful protesting and how far did that get the people. I think about integration and how it didn't benefit us. I feel as if like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, almost 100 years ago now, and it's like 70, 75 years ago, it was black folks was in a better situation. Black folks represented themselves well. They dressed better. They took care of themselves better. They held themselves to a higher standard than we do now. Right now, you see people sagging with bonnets on and slides when they go outside. They ain't representing us as a whole. And a lot of people have the individual mindset. It's me. It's about me. I ain't representing nothing in totality. So let's get into it, man. I don't want to talk y'all head off. I want to play the video and let's discuss this in the comment section. Let's further the discussion. Let's go.
North Carolina, 1955. The Ku Klux Klan has just finished their rally, and now they're doing what they've always done. Riding through black neighborhoods to terrorize families who've lived here for generations. The local police look the other way, while the government pretends it isn't happening. This was just another night in the segregated South, where wearing a white hood meant you could get away with murder. But in Monroe, something different was about to happen. Something that would shake the very foundation of how Black Americans fought for their rights. You see, while Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was preaching nonviolence in Alabama, one man in Monroe looked at those burning crosses, those night riders terrorizing his community, and decided enough was enough. His name was Robert F. Williams, and his story isn't your typical civil rights tale. Robert was a Marine veteran who came home, looked at the terror in his community, and did something that nobody thought was possible at the time. He armed his people. He organized 60 men, trained them for self-defense, and famously stated, "Nowhere in the annals of history does the record show a people delivered from bondage by patience alone." Considered a hero to many, Robert's story all started with a simple question. What happens when the oppressed refuse to be victims of the system? Robert Franklin Williams was born on February 26, 1925, in a world shaped by the shadows of slavery. His grandparents, who had lived under the whip and chain, made sure he never forgot what that meant for him. Growing up in Monroe, their stories were filled with warnings about what could happen if Black people couldn't defend themselves. Robert witnessed this truth firsthand at age 11. When he saw a police officer brutally beat a Black woman on Monroe's main street, the officer dragged her bleeding body along the pavement to jail, leaving a trail of blood as her screams echoed across the street. It was a public spectacle meant to remind the Black community of their vulnerability and inferiority. That image would be burned in young Robert's mind forever. But Monroe in the 1930s wasn't much different from the world his grandparents knew. It may have been 70 years since the end of slavery, but the heavy chains of oppression weighed heavy in the air. It was still a prison for Black people, just with different chains. White-only signs were plastered across town, back doors and separate entrances for colored folks. Every sip from a segregated water fountain, every step off the sidewalk when whites passed by. These were the daily humiliations and reminders of a system designed to keep Black Americans in their place. But then came World War II, and like many young Black men in the South, Robert saw an opportunity to better his life up north, Detroit, the arsenal of democracy, a city where you could make real money working in the auto factories. But what he found there wasn't just a job, it was an education in resistance. 1943. The ongoing war had created fierce labor competition between white and black Americans, both struggling to find ways to feed and support their families. Black workers had migrated north by the thousands, drawn by the promise of defense plant jobs, but Detroit wasn't ready. Housing was scarce, and black families were crammed into small, overcrowded neighborhoods. White workers became fearful of the competition, so they staged walkouts when black employees were promoted. In June of that year, white workers at Packard Plant, an automobile manufacturer in Detroit, shut down the entire production line to protest working alongside African Americans. Wow, these guys were serious about their racism. Detroit had quickly become a powder keg of racial tension. And when the spark finally lit, the city exploded into chaos. For 5 horrifying days, violence raged through the streets. Robert found himself caught in the middle of it all, watching as black residents fought back against white mob violence in a desperate attempt to save themselves. 34 people died in those riots. 25 of them were black. But something else was born in that fire. You see, an elephant raised into adulthood while chained to a chair will think that it cannot break free from its bondage. But we all know, mighty is the elephant. The scales had fallen from his eyes, and Robert realized that submission wasn't the only option. He could fight. Like many young black men of his generation, Robert was drafted into military service in 1944, but his experience would be different. He was assigned to the Marines, a branch that had only recently begun accepting African Americans. For a year and a half, Robert served as a private in the segregated Marines. This wasn't just military service. It was a reminder of the contradictions of fighting for democracy abroad while facing segregation in uniform. The discipline, tactical training, and organizational skills he learned in the Marines wouldn't go to waste. After the war ended and he returned home to Monroe, these same military experiences would shape his approach to defending his community. Robert wasn't alone. He was part of a generation of black veterans who returned home with the new skills and a deeper determination to fight for their rights. They had defended America abroad. Now they would defend their communities at home. But when Robert returned to Monroe in 1955, he found a town frozen in time. The same white-only signs, the same daily humiliations, the same terror from the Klan. Except now, he was seeing it through different eyes. The eyes of a trained Marine who understood the power of violence. And he wasn't.
I want to stop it for a minute because there's a few things that I want to talk about and approach. It was a question posed on the Star Report like 5 or 6 days ago. And I want to know your thoughts about this in the comment section before we continue to play the video. And I got a few things I want to address. Uh, just listen close to y'all. Should black people fight in American wars? Now, I'm saying that we should enlist in the military, but should we fight in the war? Enlisting in the military is okay because you're receiving the benefits. You're receiving the education, the free education. You trying to go towards retiring for 20 years and receive the free health care and everything. But should you fight in the wars? Enlisting and working and getting your education and everything is cool. But should we fight in the wars still because we still up against certain injustices that isn't looking out for our best interests? Now, around this time when this brother was going to the military, this was around the time that they promised them brothers a part of the GI Bill and certain things and getting homes and being able to create generational wealth for their families for fighting for this country. And when they got back home, the states rejected them because the states was still racist. The KKK was still existing and everything. When you fighting and protecting so people can live a peaceful life over here, I salute everybody that's in the military to make it to where I can live a peaceful life. Real talk. But another thing I want to talk about this because I took some notes, so let me read them. Something that was said that caught my attention in this is that when the oppressed refuse to be victims of the system, That's when you create a monster because you're oppressing the people, but we choosing to not be a victim, to not be a person that is like just down and out and everybody's against me and it ain't nothing I can do about it. Nah, I'm gonna die about it. That's interesting, man, because like me, the situation and the life that I live or whatever though, I've humbled myself in certain situations and I wish I wouldn't have looking back on it. But now I'm willing to die about my respect, my family, and my loved ones by any means necessary because it's just necessary. Another thing that caught my attention about this is that, you know, I talk about this. I've been talking about this all year, ever since the reparations conversation been coming up, ever since the foundational Black American conversation been coming up, ever since I started making the historical playlist. I made this historical playlist talking about black things from historical aspect, black intellectuals, black um, everything. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, just historical context about us. And when I created this playlist, one thing that I realized is that the government obtained their power through violence and fear. When I look at this now, it's still going on because the war has just been at a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. And the reason it's at a ceasefire because Trump sent 125 planes over there to humble Iran and target their nuclear plants. And now they're in fear because they know what the United States is capable of and they know who is back in Israel. Power is obtained through violence and fear. And I hate to say that, but it's a reality. Let's continue with the video, man. Let's get to it.
Alone. In 1947, young Robert had married Mabel Robinson, just 16 years old, but already a fierce advocate for civil rights. Despite her youth, Mabel had already seen enough injustice to last a lifetime. She grew up watching her own community struggle against segregation, and unlike many young women of her era, she refused to accept it quietly. While most civil rights couples preached nonviolence, Robert and Mabel Williams believed in something else entirely: the right of armed self-defense. People like Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, who became the faces of peaceful resistance, led dozens of nonviolent demonstrations across the South. Robert Williams had seen way too much to put their faiths in passive resistance alone. But how would this Marine veteran and his young wife transform from peaceful citizens into militant leaders of their community? And what would happen when their radical ideas clashed with the nonviolent mainstream of the civil rights movement? By the way, if you enjoy this type of content and want to see more videos about the heroes of Black history, please subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us and helps us spread awareness about our fight for freedom. To understand what Robert was about to do, you need to understand what the NAACP was supposed to be. Founded in 1909, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People emerged in response to the lynchings and racial violence sweeping America. It was created by Black and white progressives alike, aiming to fight discrimination through the courts and legislature. Their weapon of choice, however, were lawyers, not guns; respectability, not resistance. When Robert Williams returned home to Monroe after his time in Detroit and the Marines, he found a town frozen in time. With a population of just 12,000, Monroe had become a stronghold of white supremacy, home to an estimated 7,500 Klan members. Yes, you heard that right. Over half of the town's population were Klan members. Meanwhile, the local NAACP chapter was barely breathing. Like chapters across the country, they followed the national organization's preferred model, focusing on middle-class professionals like doctors, lawyers, and ministers. The kind of Black folks who wouldn't scare racist white people. The kind who fought with briefs and motions. But Robert saw things differently. When he joined the Monroe NAACP chapter in 1955 and became its president the following year, he brought with him a radical new vision. The people who needed the NAACP most weren't in courtrooms or country clubs. He went to the textile mills, where black workers endured daily humiliation for poverty wages. He went to the farms, where families still worked land their grandparents had sharecropped. And most importantly, he went to the veterans, men who, like him, had fought fascism abroad, only to face it again at home. The results were transformative. Under Robert's leadership, membership expanded dramatically as working men and women with calloused hands and battle-hardened spirits joined the fight for their rights. And the first target was the public library, a taxpayer-funded institution that had shut its doors to black citizens. This wasn't just about books. It was about the fundamental right to access public resources that black taxpayers helped fund. The campaign succeeded. The library's doors were finally opened to all citizens of Monroe, regardless of color. It was a small victory, but a significant one, proving that organized resistance could crack the foundations of segregation. But as Robert and his followers would soon learn, some victories come with a violent backlash. In 1957, Robert led the fight to integrate Monroe's public swimming pool. The math was simple. Black taxpayers had helped pay for that pool, but their children couldn't swim in it. How absurd was that? Following the NAACP's traditional playbook, they started with peaceful demonstrations. NAACP members formed picket lines around the pool. But what happened next would change everything. The protesters were met with a hail of gunfire. White mobs opened fire on the picket lines, and despite law enforcement officers being present, not a single arrest was made. The message was clear. The law would not protect them.
There's no law here, and there's no need to take the white taxes to the courts because they will be free, and that the federal government is not coming to the aid of people who are oppressed, and it is time for Negro men to stand up.
For Robert, this was the final straw. The swimming pool violence proved what he had long suspected, that legal briefs and peaceful protests alone wouldn't be enough in a town where the Klan operated with impunity. That's when Robert did something unprecedented. Drawing on his military experience and connections, he reached out to other black veterans who understood both discipline and duty. These were men who had fought fascism in Europe and the Pacific, only to find it alive and well in their hometown. They trained in military tactics, they fortified their homes, and they made it crystal clear. Any Klan attack would be met with equal force. This came to a head in the summer of 1957 when rumors spread that the Klan planned to attack Dr. A. Elbert Perry, the NAACP's vice president.
I gotta stop it, man. It's a few things that was said that needs to be addressed, that needs me to convey to y'all so we can further this conversation in the comment section. That's what the comments is there for us to use it to be able to discuss this and be able to educate ourselves together. If you agree, if you disagree, it really doesn't matter. This is for learning purposes, for me, for you, and for us to provoke thought.
The Trevor Jackson Podcast.